I offered to do something on New Zealand mistletoe, so we'll quickly go through this. We've got 40 minutes, probably about 35 now, and have a look at that. So really just a little bit about New Zealand mistletoe. It's more of an introduction than something's dedicated, but the New Zealand mistletoes all have green leaves as opposed to some that overseas that don't. So they produce their own chlorophyll, and so therefore they're classified as hemiparasitic. And their roots, and you can see the photograph there of the root hanging onto a coprosma branch there. How they're sucking moisture out of those plants. It's actually quite rare for massive dieback because of infestation, if you like, of mistletoe on our plants. And just another shot of the roots traveling down a stem with little suckers, if you like, penetrating the bark to take out nutrients and moisture. And sometimes you'll see them a bit like this. This is a different species, but you can see how he's really produced a really big lump, if you like, sitting on a branch with some Horstoria. And something I had not seen before until I went to Kelsey's bush down inland from Waimate is aerial Horstoria. There's a Horstoria here, and you can see these ones down here. Of thinking about this, it's actually quite a moist valley. And maybe they're actually taking moisture out of the air. Something hadn't seen in other mistletoes and hadn't seen before in the green mistletoe here. So we've got 8 species of mistletoe, and we'll just deal with them one at a time. A few slides from each one. So this is the yellow mistletoe in bud, and you notice where the buds come from, straight out of the stem. And so you've got to look inside the plant really to see the flower buds as they penetrate and grow and turn into decent buds before they fully open. And obviously you see this one is the yellow mistletoe, and when it opens out into some really quite nice yellow mistletoe. Now, interestingly, it is quite a lot of it around the South Island. I don't travel the North Island that much, but certainly around the South Island on beech trees generally, you'll find yellow mistletoe, and you'll find it quite low down in the trees too. And eye level, and I haven't seen it above eye level as well, but certainly at eye level on beech trees, and a whole lot of different places, from Kepler Track. And Lake Rotoiti in Nelson Lakes, and Arthur's Pass up near the snow line, growing on trees up through there. So quite an interesting plant. And if you know mistletoe is opened by bellbirds generally, or tui, and they twist those little knobs on top, and it flicks the petals down and sprays the front of the bird with pollen. And as they move on to the next plant, the cross pollination is undertaken by birds. There's also a native bee that will do exactly the same thing, very small bee that will do the same thing for that as well. And as the yellow one gets old, it actually changes color. It still looks quite attractive as a plant. And young ones, and you'll often see flower buds and fruit at the same time, and some quite nice fruit as well. See the red stems and the green leaves, and once you've spotted them, they're actually quite easy to actually spot in the tree. You can see some beech leaves at the bottom of the photograph there, and that's what you're actually looking for in green leaf time. The red stems, green leaves, and a red edge to each of the leaf. So, and to say, once you've seen it once, you'll actually be able to spot it quite happily. And it tends to grow on the outside of a tree as opposed to inside of a tree, which we'll see a bit later on. So on the green leaves, stems and branchlets of trees. Move over to the most common mistletoe in New Zealand, which is the green mistletoe, and the flowers are insignificant, unlike what we've just seen with the yellow one. We have these little insignificant flowers, and green. You can see the pollen stalks on there from these ones. This particular mistletoe, the previous one will host mainly on beach. The green mistletoe will host on over 300 different species in New Zealand, including exotics. I've seen them on apple trees. I've seen them on wattles, all sorts of places, and you'll see them right down at the coast near the waterline, and right up in the tops of hills where they're totally exposed to the elements. Really tough plant. Again, the flowers inside the foliage, so getting some protection from the foliage, but and quite a massive amount of flowers as well. And coming up to fruiting, so plenty of fruit, and not only do bellbirds fertilize the other ones, they also eat the fruit here and distribute the seeds with a bit of manure to hopefully land on another appropriate place on another tree. And again, so this is the green mistletoe, and you can see it does exactly the same thing with its flower buds coming off the stem in the most weird and wonderful places, and you can actually see there where it's really hard attached to this particular tree. And you'll see it growing like that out of the tops of Caprosma, massive lot around the Otago coastline, and so that one in the Otago, down the Otago coastline, you see it's starting to look like it's quite hard and able to withstand those coastal conditions. This one is actually back in Kelsey's bush in inland Waimate, and again you can see that probably the leaves are a little bit greener and a little bit more soft in terms of their growth, because of location, and often you'll see them really hard and fast like that. This is the top of Frog Rock. I don't know if you know Frog Rock, out of north of Christchurch. It's a limestone rock area right on top of that peak like this, and it's grown right on top of that. Yeah, totally out in the open. And there are 3 or 4 apple trees around it, and they're all covered in it as well. And that's the fruit. So quite a nice fruit, and again, good food, and the seed will pass through, and a bird, and it will, and if we're lucky, it'll land in the right place to propagate and attach to another plant. This is the main one that's been used around Christchurch as part of a mistletoe rehabilitation project. And in just recently, in the Otago University study of the green mistletoes, really found that on a wide range of plants, the insect populations inside those clumps of mistletoe are actually quite wide ranging. When it grows on deciduous host trees, there is a much higher insect population in richness in the winter time than over and above other hosts. So it's, and I think that research also reported some new insect species that are actually being hosted inside the mistletoe. So not only is mistletoe itself, but also supporting an ecosystem there. So the next 3 are 3 species of mistletoe called the dwarf or leafless mistletoes. You can see from this one, which is Lindsay, that they are actually flattened stems, and not those flattened stems and the size of these things be no longer than probably 10 centimeters, and so quite hard to spot on trees. And Lindsay is probably the most popular around the place. This is downtown Christchurch, and these pieces on the end here are flower spikes, and and they don't need birds to open and distribute the seed. They work on hydraulic pressure, build up of moisture in the stem, and when the seed is ripe, explode it out to land on hopefully another host. And this particular one's growing on Lophomertus, and it's absolutely covered in this particular species, but it is very hard to spot. I've seen quite a bit of this one, and that's another one just showing the amount of flower spikes covering all over the plant. Now, the next two I haven't seen, and I've got photographs of them, but this is Siliconoides, which is, as you can see, a very rounded stem, also green, and producing the same sort of seed distribution system, growing mainly on Carnuka. And I've had reports of where it's growing, and I've gone in there to see it, and I cannot find it, even with the best of instructions, of where it is. So have a look around some places. It's growing down in Dunedin. It's growing on Banks Peninsula in places, and a few other places around. You'll find it, but you can see that typical rounded evergreen stem. But that's actually quite a superb photograph of it as well. So you can see the difference between these ones here and this one, which is much more exposed, and it's a much tighter branching system, but the same branching system producing its own chlorophyll. That's the one I went looking for, and I couldn't find it. Someone else found it. And then sort of halfway between Lindsay-eye with the flattened stems and Siliconoides with the rounded stems, you have this clavata. I've never seen a really good photograph of it, but this is, again, you can see by the size of the leaves in the background how small this plant really is. And so you have to have good spotting to find it. And a previous member of the National Executive in Wellington has promised to take me to one next time I'm in Wellington. Now we come on to the showy ones. Pyroxilla calensii, the scarlet mistletoe. This was taken in the Catlins at about sea level, and as you can see that they had a storm through there and they broke the tree and actually dropped the mistletoe down so I could actually photograph it, which was actually quite cute, because this is the first one I actually ever saw in full flower. Typical flower buds coming through. This is Tuatapere, the scenic reserve at Tuatapere. Plenty of it in that scenic reserve. And as you can see, these bright scarlet mistletoe flowers, quite tightly held together in bunches, and producing this kind of weird look about them, being sort of intertwined and all over the place. And just a close-up of that, and you can see the pollen sacs on the ends of those stamen there. So basically there so the birds can actually get covered in pollen and do their trick. Now, one of the things, this is scarlet mistletoe. Now, the flowers are just finished. Now, telling the difference between calensii and the next one is easily spotted in all year round, because this has smooth leaves and no blisters on the leaf. And when we see the blisters on the leaf of the other species, which we'll come to, those blisters there are there all year round, and quite easy to make that connection as to which species it is, apart from the flowers. And this is scarlet mistletoe. You see where it's attached itself to the tree trunk there, right actually hard in on the tree trunk and hard in the middle of the tree. If you can see what I mean. When we see the next one, it grows on the outside, more to the outside of the tree. And that's scarlet mistletoe on beach, is grazing underneath that. So that's the kind of size we're looking at. It's possibly not one plant, it's possibly several plants on that particular tree. And that's taken in the paddock right beside that Tuatapere scenic reserve. So it's actually doing quite well in that particular area. This is Pyroxilla tetrapetala, It's the red mistletoe. You see this one looks a bit orange, and it does vary in color a little bit. But you can see that instantly the flowers are much more further spaced apart, and it doesn't seem to be as tight on the tree. I've generally found this in the more mountainous areas, whereas the previous calensoi on the more lowland areas. And this is how it attaches to the tree, which is quite different to the other one. It's wrapped around that tree, and it needs that strength to hold it out from the tree. And that's a young bud waiting for those birds to come along and flick it open. And you can just see a couple of blisters on those leaves there in the middle. And that's a very distinguishing mark. And there's the flowers almost ready for the birds to come along. Another couple of good shots for that. And that's how it comes out. So quite different from scarlet in that the flowers are much more spaced along the stem, and they actually kind of open out a bit further. And just a couple of close-ups there. You can see the style and stigma, and you can see, and you can pick up the anthers on that as well. Same method of pollination. And you can see on this one, it's kind of like pushing out from the tree. It wants to get more light than living in the center of the tree. This is the same species as further up the mountains, and you can see different color, the red form there from the tree. And I did check it out to make sure it had blisters on the leaves as well. And that's up on the mountains, just showing that one. Blisters. And my friend Jerry McSweeney, people will know Dr. Jerry McSweeney on the West Coast, great conservationist. He's sent me this photograph of Tetrapetala with a yellow form. And yeah, quite spectacular to see. You actually go back and have a look at the difference in coloration to to this one here. Now, lovely plant. And he suggests there's quite a few yellow ones around it, but they're not very obvious. And the last living species is Tupea antarctica here, and it grows around the countryside quite well. It's coastal. This is Aotearoa in Tane's garden, and there's plenty of it in there, growing on a range of trees, particularly on Pittosporum. And unfortunately, tiny little green flowers. The flowers are just finished off on that one. I think some green flowers here. So unspectacular at this particular stage, but quite noticeable and coming up to fruit. And that's the fruit. And so that's why it's called the white mistletoe, and it has white fruit. But hang on, they do say it's pink as well. And this is my friend Kent, who sent me this photograph from Taupo Way of a pink form. And so really it's spectacular in fruit and unspectacular in flowering and in foliage sometimes. Just another shot of that. And we'll have a quick look at this one. This one is extinct. Well, that's last seen alive in 1954. This one here is Sue Wickerson, who was recently received our Associate of Honour as a botanical artist, and she created the Plant Conservation Network Achievement Award by recreating a botanical watercolour, if you like, from herbarium specimens and first-hand knowledge from some people, Lucy Cramwell, Audrey Eagle, Mike Wilcox, who also received an Associate of Honour this year, Peggy Sexton, Barbara Sedgent, all of whom actually saw the plant alive in the 1950s. So we're able to give a good explanation of it, and she was able to reproduce that one. So that's what it looked like. Just because no one's seen it since 1954, who knows? It may still be out there. So that's my last slide for the night anyway. As I say, just a quick run round. I hope you enjoyed that and just whet your appetite for mistletoe. Mistletoe has been decimated mainly by possum browse throughout the country. So control of possums, definitely on the cards to bring back these mistletoes. I recently went through along the Dove River up Motueka, and the scarlet mistletoe is growing very nicely on many trees along the Dove River at the Motueka end towards the Tuatapere Road. There's big bunches of it growing on there, and also at the same time I saw a tree going into the Rewalker resurgence, and you couldn't miss it when it's in full flower. It's right in front of you, just right on the bend, and so they are doing well. And where possum is controlled, they're doing well. And I think the Brook Sanctuary in Nelson now has at least got, I know that at least got a green mistletoe in the sanctuary in there, and they're keeping the browsing animals out of that to start rebuilding some of these populations, because this is a really interesting plant. If you go back overseas and think about all the stories you hear about mistletoe and Christmas and all the rest, well, of course, if you went to Europe at Christmas time, the mistletoes are not in flower, but in New Zealand, the red and orange ones and the yellow ones are all in flower at Christmas time. So it's certainly much better life here in New Zealand with the mistletoes. So with that, anybody want to ask any questions?
I will.
You will.
I will. Yeah, I've got one.
Sure.
Are we any good at growing these in our botanic gardens at all, or is it just that they're just too hard to cultivate?
Well, Christchurch Botanic Gardens have been able to grow the green mistletoe, but interestingly enough, a number of them died in the last 12 months through drought. The summer's been quite a good wet summer for us, but the dry summers in botanic gardens in Christchurch, and quite a number of them actually died. I don't know how well they're doing in private gardens, but they were collecting seed and distributing seed to people and teaching them how to actually plant them, if you like, on trees and shrubs in their own garden. And I don't think there's been any follow-up work to find out how successful all of those were. But it was a 2 or 3 year project that they had going there to get them out there. Yes, someone sent me a photograph of one of the mistletoes they had on a bonsai plant at home, and they had actually managed to sew it onto the bonsai plant, and it was growing quite well. They were suggesting it was scarlet. I wasn't too sure, and the only way you're going to find out is when it flowers. So I might get a photograph in a couple of years' time when he had quite a bit of leaf on it, so it was quite good. If you are interested in spotting them, the colourful ones, yeah, through the Christmas New Year period, definitely you'll see them. You'll see the green mistletoe in blobs. If you go to Aotearoa Nui, the plane trees up through the main drag at Aotearoa Nui, and look up. Hundreds of green mistletoe growing in those plane trees at Aotearoa Nui. And I know on the east coast of North Island, they're looking again. There's quite a good conservation group up there. They're looking at growing, seeing how they can actually get green mistletoe established, because it's very hardy. Jerry McSweeney, who I mentioned earlier, was growing the red mistletoe by gluing the seeds onto beech trees using PVA glue, and so in the little branchlets, using some PVA glue to actually hold it in place. And he was getting some success. I don't think he's been doing it lately, but he was getting success around his Wilderness Lodge area, because he was doing it as a tourist attraction. The tourist side of it would be great. Keith.
Yeah, you were showing some with blisters. Were you suggesting they were part of the leaf, or are they an insect gall?
I haven't seen anything about what's inside those blisters. So it's just the blisters only appear on that one species of Paraxilla, and where the other species doesn't have it at all. Now, potentially there's an insect hiding in there and blistering that, and living symbiotically in there, and that's fine. And it's much more of a mountain species, and the Kalenzoi, which is the scarlet one, is much more of a lowland species. And actually quite like the cool climate, but I have seen photographs of some up through the North Island on trees and farmland and stuff as well. But I try to use my own photographs.
The other thing that struck me was that some of those early ones when I came in, the flower looked remarkably like fuchsia procumbens, shape-wise.
Yeah, actually, interesting. I should have talked about the size of those flowers on those some of those earlier ones, because those flowers are actually around about up to 4 centimeters long, each individual flower. So they're not small flowers, but the little green ones, they are tiny little green things, and possibly a bit of wind pollination as well as insect population going on in those as well. It's unfortunate those flowers are not as big and bright, but certainly with that one, you get fruit like that or like that. You've got to be amazed with the amount of fruit these things produce, and you would hope that they are spreading out quite well. And I know this is down in the Dunedin way. Have you seen it down there, Dylan?
No, not that one. Yeah, of course. Yeah, back to trying to grow them at Botanic Gardens. We've tried to grow several of the species on trees because we've got large quantities of green mistletoe, including even on a cordyline. So, and I don't know of any other ones on a monocot. So but we've had very little success of growing other species.
Yeah. And I might ask Jerry he can send me the recipe one day, and how he actually managed to do it. But it's quite a few years ago that I was actually talking to him, so early 2000s, about that. When I was talking to him 2 years ago, he was busy showing me all the mistletoe around his place. But it is an interesting group of plants, and over Christmas, if we could get some more grown, get rid of some more possums, and get them growing, they are really attractive. Yeah, those bright red ones really stand out as you drive. You can drive along the road and go, bloody hell, what's that? And when I do that, family go nuts because I put the brakes on pretty quickly. But that's probably about all I can tell you.
Alan, sorry, Alan. Mary and I was going to say at Auckland BG, we've been trying to grow Cortha saliconoides, so we are attempting to propagate and grow that in Manuka from memory, Manuka or Kanuka, can't remember which one. Kanuka. We did have success in germinating some last year, but it didn't survive, so having another crack.
Yeah, I have. That is actually quite a nice species, I think, and in Lindsay eyes are right. Clavator is probably not as spectacular, even for a small thing. I mean, those siliconoides will only be lucky to see it 10, 12 centimeters big in terms of that, just these little blobs, and you easily missed. And it's not well. You can go onto iNaturalist and have a look and see people who have observed where they've observed those plants growing as well, and that's actually quite useful in terms of getting an idea where you might go to visit and see these plants growing. And,
can you go back a bit earlier, Alan, to those that I thought looked like fuchsia procumbens? Great talk, by the way. I said, you see. That reminds me of fuchsia procumbens.
They are quite upright, those flowers, and you can see the petals folding back quite well. Yeah. What's the previous one like? Yeah, this is the buds, just waiting to break. This particular few of these photographs are actually taken off a plant that's actually in cultivation at the University in Canterbury. It's on growing on beech tree. Some of the other photographs are taken in the wild as well.
How close are these some of these species to fuchsia? Do you know?
Oh, it's quite a different family. I don't know how far apart the families are, Keith.
No, I
But
mean,
definitely
as
different
I say,
families.
it's a great presentation. I mean, I knew nothing about what you've been talking about, so I'm quite impressed. But it just struck me, as I say, that they do look like
Yeah,
fuchsia cucumbers
yeah, I can see that.
superficially.
It would be interesting to see if they had the same pollinators. Maybe there's a convergence in floral
Yeah,
morphology towards the pollinators.
yeah.
Indeed,
Look,
yeah.
I did this presentation to the New Zealand Alpine Garden Society, and one of the women in there had been one of the early researchers on mistletoe, and was able to prove that it was the birds that were actually how they actually got into that, how they twisted that top, got sprayed with pollen, and then did the pollination, and she was sitting underneath mistletoe trees for days on end, observing that. So it was quite actually interesting doing a presentation to someone actually probably, knew more about that part of what was going on than perhaps I did at that time. It is certainly birds and native bee. And parents, who's very small native bee is able to twist that and get it to explode out, which is interesting. Yeah.
It's clear here. That extinct one, or
Yep.
possibly,
Yeah.
which part of the North Island was that last seen in?
I tried checking up on the exact location, and it is a bit remote.
I was just wondering whether it was, if I don't know how these things work, but if a group such as ours or a university encouraged or connected with the hunters and the Maori in that area, whether they could keep an eye out for it. You never know. They see things out in the bush all the time.
Well, that's right, and we live in hope that that something did survive somewhere, on a steep cliff somewhere or wherever, and but as I say, no one's seen it since 1954, and it was only on one plant as far as I know. Yeah, it would be really nice if it actually popped up.
It just captures your attention. It's one of those things that would just get the whole nation would be interested. It's more exciting than a blinking panther down in the South Island or a moose,